It's a conclusion of last week of Parshas Balak. The end of the story was that Balak hired Bilam in order to curse the Jewish people. He should have hired Pinchas. That's his mistake right there. But he didn't hire. He hired Bilam because he realized they couldn't do it with force. He realized the Jewish people are different, and we have to do it in a supernatural way. So he got the prophet. As we all know, Bilam was a great prophet. In fact, we know Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest of all prophets. He's the Av HaNeviim. But the Gemara says, based on the pasuk at the end of the Dvarim, will come Navi Od Yisrael. In Yisrael, no one was as great potentially as Moshe, but Bilam was, and because you have to level the playing field. And if you're going to have a tzaddik who could do great things, and you have to have a rush who could do it also. So Bilam had the opportunity, but Midas rose and other things led him astray. So as the story goes, he tried to curse the Jewish people. Kel Zol Mechol Yom. He's the only one who knew exactly when that moment was coming. However, God took away that moment of anger for that certain period because he didn't want Bilam to destroy the Jewish people. As Tosfos pointed out in Brachas and Daf Zayin, what could he say in a couple of seconds? So either first answer to Tosfos is Kalem. That's it, destroy the Jewish people. And God will figure it out. Just like we have in a positive note, for a bris milah, we have a tradition that when Yoel HaNavi comes down and heals the chol, the katan hanimo, the child who was, and therefore we have a tradition that you ask that anyone who prays at that moment, that it's an extra segula. The same thing. What are you going to say in that second? You just tell God help, and God will figure out. He'll know what you need. So we see that Tosfos says that it's enough to give a short prayer. And the second answer, Tosfos, is more of a halachic answer, where the Aruch HaShulchan takes a very halachic, that as long as you begin the curse in the appropriate time, so too it could continue afterwards. And the Aruch HaShulchan, based on this Tosfos and other sources, says, let's say you have to daven mincha by shkia, by sunset. So the Aruch HaShulchan writes, if you begin mincha before sunset, even if you go afterwards, it's still considered tefillah bismana, because we go basar haschala, like we see over here. But either way, so we see Kel Zol Mechol Yom, and he was going to curse out the Jews. And then what happened was God didn't get angry. And that's the pshat, Atan. And Balak says now, Bilam says now, this is the time. Why specifically now? Because he realized that God took out the moment of anger. That really God is full of chesed. And for 23 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds, he's totally chesed. 1 second a day, Kel Zolam. Why is God angry at all? Like if anger is a bad midah, why should God get angry? But he has to keep the balance in the world. You have to because even though we assume chesed, when we talk about chesed, it's a good thing. But chesed to the extreme, unbridled, leads to the worst averas. As the Torah tells us at the end of Acharei Mos, which we read on Yom Kippur of all days, it talks about the prohibition of illicit relations, incest, etc. And it says at the end of the pasuk, "Ki chesed hu." It's a tremendous chesed. So the Mefarshim are saying, what kind of chesed? So Rashi quotes the Chazal, "Olam bechesed yibaneh." That's of the world. But others point out, the Bali Machshava, Rav Dessler and others, that no, ki chesed hu, that if a person takes chesed to the total extreme, you end up with znus. A sister, I love my sister. Why not? And in fact, that's what they point out, that like that's to happen with Yishmael. The different medrashim, why didn't, when God went down to the Umas Olam and said, you want to accept the Torah, so they said, what's in it? So when it came to Yishmael, they said, it says, go sinaf. Oh, go sinaf, we can't take it. Because that's what happened to Yishmael. He took the chesed of Avram, and he took it totally to the extreme, and therefore led to znus. Don't be fooled by the outfits people wear. There's a lot of znus going on in Yishmael. And it's based on Yishmael. But Yitzchak had Gvura, he tempered Avram, and therefore he ended up as well with the Yaakov. So any midah in extreme is no good. Even chesed, even too much chesed could lead to znus.
I would just like to add a change of approach, and that is that midas hadin permits midas hachesed. That without the midas hadin, you cannot have chesed, because Midas Hadin would destroy in such a way that you cannot redeem with chesed. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with his infinite power, is able to permit chesed to exist in the so-called quantified way of the finite din. So you have a finite din that permits, to give you a mushal, that let's say a person can live with cancer, but it reaches a certain point that if you don't eliminate that cancer, you have no life. Chesed is life. So therefore, that is a moment that is not, it is a midas chesed, the din, the justification of eliminating evil permits chesed to exist. Because if that second, that would not be pleasant, then chesed would be totally destroyed.
Exactly, and that's what Chazal say, the same Yisod at the beginning of the creation of the world. The pasuk says that the Torah originally, because first the one pasuk says Elokim, which is usually Midas Hadin, and Hashem is originally created the world with Midas Hadin, but then he realized straight din without any, so therefore he mixed it in with Chesed, because you need both Chesed and din have to live off one another. That's the Rambam tells us in many places in Shmona Prakim when he gives us foundations to life. He says the middle road, you always need a balance in life, whether it's a balance between chesed and gvura, tzedakah, and that's why he gives the example with the rod. You bend the rod all the way to the left, you want it back in the middle. If you just move it back to the middle, it's going to go back to the left. You have to move it all the way to the right, and then it goes back to the middle, because all extremes are bad. But if you have a sickness, then you have to take, you have to take antibiotics sometimes. But if you're healthy, antibiotic isn't going to help you. And in fact, that's what the Rav always pointed out, Rav Soloveitchik, when the Gemara in Sukkah, when it's talking about the halach of Hadassim, it's one of the four species. So one of the halachas of Hadassim is you need Hadassim Mishulish. You have to be a third. So the Gemara talks about if a Hadas Shota, a psychotic Hadas is puzzle. So what's the pshat? It's a Hadas Shota. So that's what Rav Soloveitchik explains, because the Hadas Mishulish has to be balanced. It says the three on each side. When someone is imbalanced, then it becomes puzzle. And in fact, that's what we see always points out. If you look at children, it's total joy or total, like 1 second they're playing with the blocks, the dolls, they're the happiest, kulo. The next second you knock down the blocks, they're like crying hysterically because there's no balance. In life, it's the problem with the child. He's all happy, all sad. He doesn't have the proper balance of perceptions. That's what he points out, and that's the yisod here. You need a combination of chesed and din, and that's why Bilam realized, right now is my chance. I got to curse the Jewish people because right now there's no kas and there's no anger. Now's my chance to get the Jewish people, because why all of a sudden now were they nechshel and snus? Why not last week? Why not next week? It was this moment he realized, and that.
But it's not a question of balance. I'm trying to bring another dimension to it. It's not that you have a dialectic process that you want to balance. And good. There's another aspect. It permits the chesed to exist, because if you have ra, that becomes dominant, or even it's a certain fraction that destroys the chesed. For example, a guy could be very nice enough, but at a certain point, that is where it is. So it's not a question of getting balance, it's permitting chesed. The din permits chesed. It's a little subtle differences. You see, it doesn't deal with extreme. You know what I'm saying? It has to take place in order for chesed to exist.
Right.
Because the Rambam took a Socratic, Aristotelian approach of balance. I'm not so convinced on that Greek philosophy. I like the other extreme, the idea that only din permits chesed, because if you won't have that concept of din, then chesed could not.
Exactly, and that's what we put in. That's the pshat in the beginning of Pinchas. That Pinchas, the Kanoas Kinasi, he was.
The alarm is for school. I don't know how to turn that off.
Neither do I. That's not here.
It's not here.
That's I don't know what to do. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's the pshat in Pinchas. That Pinchas, at the beginning of the parsha, he came and he went ahead and Zimri was living with Cosby, and he went ahead and he had to act right away. He couldn't have time to ask the Shiloh. He went ahead and he asked, and he went ahead and he killed him. And what's his reward? Brisi Shalom. So Bedin, so that's what Pinchas, he acted Bedin. He went ahead, the halach of Bol Aramis, Pogimbo, he went ahead, and what kind of reward is that? He did an act of Kanas, and he got Brisi Shalom. But that's the Yisod, that he acted with din. Once you have the din, then you get the chesed. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Many are pacifists, like,
I'm sorry.
and and they feel you can never have any violence, you can never fight back, and therefore you let the evil take over. But Pinchas, we see certain times he did an act, even though it looked like a Maisach Razi, you're killing someone, but ultimately it's a tremendous act of chesed. He acted in din, but he went ahead and he stopped the Magefa. And that's why and that's why, in fact, the Mefarshim discuss, like, what's the reward? Like, we know the old joke, if your father's a Kohen, you're a Kohen. So, like, what do you mean he made Pinchas a Kohen? Wasn't Pinchas a Kohen before? So those are two schools of thought in the Rishonim. Some Rishonim learned that actually Pinchas wasn't. That the Dafka gave it to Aaron, Elazar, then whoever they anointed afterwards became, but Pinchas wasn't a Kohen. And it was a special thing, and then they made him a Kohen. But other Rishonim who learned that Pinchas was a Kohen, so what's the pshat? So that's what they point out. The Gemara tells us in Brachas and in Yavamas about a Kohen Shaharag. That if a Kohen kills, he's involved in a Ma'aser Ritzicha, so perhaps he's puzzled for Birkas Kohanim, he's puzzled for Duchening, and therefore that was a special Brisi Sholem. Even though normally, as the Chinuch points out, we go after a Ma'asim, that's why we have so many mitzvahs. So we believe, not like Western society, wait till you feel like it that it works. Actions create mood, and therefore we have so many mitzvahs, and therefore, so Pinchas really should have been affected. I think like Golda Meir famously said, he could forgive the Arabs for killing the Israelis, but he can't forgive them for what they did to forcing Israeli soldiers to go ahead, and kill, and you become a different type of person. Your personality changes. You're involved in those acts. So like the Orach Chaim writes by the end in Parshas, in the Varam, that by the Aaron Nidachas, so it says the pasuk ends off that it's like a bracha, and he says why? Because the bracha is, even though normally you're affected by a Ma'aser Ritzicha, but here you're doing it for a mitzvah, so therefore you're not affected. That's what the Netziv and others point out here. Even though he should have been puzzled for Duchening, for doing the avoda, but the greatness of his Ma'aser was, he went ahead and he was saved, and therefore Pinchas saved Klai, and that's how we begin making up, stopping the Magefa, 24,000 people.